Hello everyone, and welcome to my General Hospital Today channel. Jacinda, long underestimated as merely clever, finally stepped out of the shadows and into full antagonist mode, choosing Michael as both her target and her trophy. From the first subtle manipulation to the jaw-dropping betrayals that followed, Jacinda's campaign against Michael was not impulsive, it was surgical. She studied his weaknesses, anticipated his moral reflexes, and exploited the one thing Michael has always believed would protect him, his conscience. In classic General Hospital fashion, the story unfolded layer by layer, revealing that Jacinda's endgame was never about love or loyalty but leverage, legacy, and control, all while Michael believed he was navigating a familiar corporate battlefield rather than a personal war. As the pressure mounted, the audience watched Michael, normally the strategist, become reactive, forced into decisions that chipped away at his credibility and tested his values, proving that Jacinda didn't need brute force to bring a Corinthos to his knees, she only needed patience and a willingness to play dirty. The brilliance of this arc lies in how it mirrored Michael's own history, raised amid deception, trained to survive betrayal, yet still managed to catch him off guard, suggesting that no amount of experience can fully armor someone against an enemy who understands them too well. Jacinda's first move was deceptively small, a well-timed leak here, a whispered suggestion there, just enough to create doubt without revealing the source. She positioned herself as an ally, a confidant who understood the pressures Michael faced, especially with ELQ, Aurora, and the endless Corinthos Quartermain tug-of-war pulling him in opposite directions. Every smile carried a hook, every agreement hid a condition, and by the time Michael realized he was being maneuvered, Jacinda had already secured her foothold. What made it especially devastating was how she weaponized truth, selective truth, using real facts twisted into weapons, ensuring that when Michael pushed back, he sounded defensive rather than decisive. Port Charles thrives on perception, and Jacinda mastered it, painting Michael as compromised, impulsive, even hypocritical, while she appeared reasonable, forward-thinking, and just ruthless enough to be respected. The tension escalated when Jacinda crossed the line from corporate sabotage into personal intrusion, exploiting Michael's relationships as pressure points. She didn't merely threaten his business interests, she destabilized his emotional foundation, forcing him to choose between protecting his family and preserving his integrity. Each choice came with a cost, and Jacinda made sure the bill was paid publicly. The fallout rippled outward, drawing in familiar faces who sensed something was wrong but couldn't quite pinpoint the architect of the chaos. Friends questioned Michael's judgment, rivals smelled blood, and allies hesitated, giving Jacinda exactly what she wanted: isolation. In soap storytelling, isolation is the prelude to collapse, and Jacinda orchestrated it with chilling precision. One of the most shocking turns came when Jacinda baited Michael into a moral compromise, presenting him with a scenario where doing the right thing would still result in loss, while doing the wrong thing promised temporary salvation. Michael's hesitation, so human, so painfully Corinthos, was all Jacinda needed. She captured the moment, figuratively and literally, ensuring that whatever choice he made could later be reframed as proof of guilt. This is where the arc transcended typical villainy and entered psychological warfare. Jacinda wasn't content to win, she wanted Michael to doubt himself. And doubt, in Port Charles, is deadlier than any mob threat. The writing smartly leaned into Michael's history with betrayal, AJ, Sonny, corporate coups past, reminding viewers that his greatest fear isn't losing power but becoming the very thing he's fought against. Jacinda exploited that fear mercilessly, pushing him to the brink while maintaining plausible deniability. When cracks began to show, she didn't retreat, she doubled down, orchestrating a public reckoning that forced Michael to defend himself in a room full of skeptics. The confrontation was electric, sharp dialogue, loaded silences, and the unmistakable sense that Jacinda had already won the moment she compelled Michael to react. Even when he landed verbal blows, they felt hollow, because Jacinda had controlled the narrative long before the meeting began. Fans erupted online, torn between outrage at Jacinda's tactics and grudging admiration for her nerve. That's the hallmark of a great GH antagonist, someone you love to hate because they're effective. The aftermath only deepened the wound. Michael's attempts to regain control exposed how thoroughly Jacinda had embedded herself in his world. Contracts had been altered, alliances quietly shifted, and confidences betrayed, all without leaving fingerprints. Each revelation landed like a gut punch, not because it was implausible, but because it made devastating sense in retrospect. Jacinda had played the long game, and Michael, despite his intelligence, had underestimated her ambition. The personal stakes peaked when Michael realized that Jacinda's ultimate objective wasn't just to dethrone him but to redefine him in the eyes of Port Charles, as reckless, compromised, and unworthy of trust. That kind of damage lingers long after balance sheets recover. The brilliance of the arc also lay in how it set up future consequences. Jacinda didn't simply win and exit, she altered the ecosystem. Relationships were strained, old grudges reignited, and Michael was left facing a crossroads that demanded evolution. Would he harden, embracing the darker tactics of his upbringing, or would he double down on transparency and risk further loss? Jacinda forced that question, and in doing so, became a catalyst rather than a conclusion. Even her moments of vulnerability, brief, strategic, added texture, hinting at motivations rooted in past slights and unfulfilled promises, without ever excusing her actions. That ambiguity kept viewers guessing. Was Jacinda driven by revenge, ambition, or a twisted sense of justice? Perhaps all three. What's undeniable is that she outplayed Michael on his own board, using intelligence instead of intimidation, patience instead of power, and timing instead of force. As the dust settled, the implications were clear. Michael would never approach partnership the same way again, and Port Charles had a new power player who proved that the dirtiest games are often the quietest. In a town defined by mob wars and melodrama, Jacinda's calculated cruelty felt refreshingly dangerous, reminding us that the most shocking betrayals don't always come with a gunshot, they come with a signature, a smile, and the devastating realization that you trusted the wrong person. This storyline reaffirmed why General Hospital endures. It understands that true drama lives in choices, consequences, and characters willing to cross lines others won't. Jacinda crossed them all, and Michael paid the price, setting the stage for a reckoning that promises to be just as explosive as the betrayal that started it. As the immediate shock of Jacinda's betrayal settled, what lingered in Port Charles was far more dangerous than outrage. It was uncertainty. Michael Corinthos had built his reputation on being the different Corinthos, the one who rejected Sonny's methods, the one who believed that intelligence, ethics, and patience could outmaneuver brute force. Jacinda didn't just attack his business or his name, she attacked that identity. In the days following her latest power grab, Michael found himself staring at contracts he no longer recognized, allies who suddenly spoke in rehearsed half-truths, and board members who avoided eye contact like men already preparing for a funeral. Jacinda had achieved something rare in this town. She made Michael feel out of control without ever raising her voice. That kind of domination cuts deeper than any hostile takeover. What made it worse was how cleanly she played it. There was no obvious crime, no scandal that could be exposed and undone with one bold move. Jacinda operated in the gray, exploiting loopholes, exploiting people, and exploiting Michael's reluctance to become ruthless. Every option he considered carried consequences she had already anticipated. If he fought publicly, he looked defensive. If he stayed silent, the narrative hardened against him. Jacinda had trapped him in a psychological vice, tightening it slowly so no one noticed until the pressure became unbearable. Even Carly, usually quick to smell blood in the water, struggled to pinpoint exactly how Jacinda had pulled it off. And that terrified her. Because if Carly Corinthos couldn't see the threat clearly, then Jacinda was far more dangerous than anyone realized. Michael's personal life fared no better. Jacinda understood something fundamental about him. Business losses anger Michael, but personal betrayals haunt him. So she made sure the two became inseparable. Subtle suggestions planted seeds of doubt between Michael and those closest to him. A carefully timed comment implied that someone had talked out of turn. A leaked email suggested divided loyalties. Suddenly, conversations felt strained, trust felt conditional, and Michael, already under siege, began to question whether anyone around him was truly on his side. Jacinda didn't need to turn his loved ones against him, she only needed to make him wonder if they might be turned. That paranoia did the rest of the work for her. One of the most devastating moments came when Michael attempted to regain leverage by appealing to what he believed was Jacinda's weakness, her need for recognition. In a private meeting, he confronted her calmly, laying out evidence of her manipulation and offering a compromise that would allow them both to walk away with something intact. For a fleeting moment, it seemed like Jacinda might accept. She listened, nodded, even appeared reflective. And then she smiled, not warmly, but knowingly, and dismantled his argument piece by piece. She revealed that every move he thought was proactive had been reactive, every safeguard he trusted had already been neutralized. Worse, she implied that his attempt at compromise only proved her point. Michael Corinthos wasn't built to win wars like this anymore. That single interaction marked a turning point. Michael didn't just lose ground, he lost certainty. The ripple effects reached far beyond Michael himself. Rivals who once feared crossing him began testing boundaries. Deals stalled. Negotiations grew aggressive. Port Charles, ever attuned to shifts in power, sensed vulnerability and responded accordingly. Jacinda had altered the balance, and everyone felt it. Meanwhile, she continued to present herself as the picture of professionalism, measured, composed, and conveniently uninvolved in the chaos surrounding Michael. That contrast was devastating. The more he struggled, the more she appeared stable. The more he defended himself, the more she looked vindicated. It was character assassination executed with surgical restraint. Yet Jacinda's brilliance lay not just in her tactics, but in her timing. She waited until Michael was exhausted before delivering her most brutal blow. When he was stretched thin, emotionally raw, and desperate for a win, she offered him one, on her terms. A deal that would restore part of what he'd lost, stabilize his position, and quiet the whispers. All it required was a single concession, small on paper but enormous in principle. Accepting it wouldn't make Michael evil, but it would make him complicit. And Jacinda knew exactly how much that would cost him internally. The scene played out with agonizing restraint, Michael torn between survival and self-respect, Jacinda calm and patient, confident that either outcome benefited her. If he refused, he lost publicly. If he accepted, he lost privately. That's not strategy, that's cruelty. The writing smartly refused to give the audience an easy catharsis. There was no immediate revenge, no sudden exposure that restored order. Instead, the story lingered in the aftermath, forcing viewers to sit with Michael's reckoning. He began revisiting moments from his past, times when he'd condemned Sonny's methods, times when he'd sworn he would never cross certain lines. Jacinda had forced him to confront an uncomfortable truth: moral clarity is a luxury, and power demands compromise. The question wasn't whether Michael could beat Jacinda, it was whether doing so would turn him into someone he no longer recognized. That internal conflict elevated the storyline from a simple power struggle to a character study, reminding fans why Michael remains one of General Hospital's most complex figures. Jacinda, meanwhile, showed no signs of remorse. If anything, her confidence grew. She moved through Port Charles like someone who knew she'd changed the rules, daring anyone to challenge her. But the show cleverly hinted at cracks beneath her composure. Brief moments, an expression held too long, a silence where there should have been a reply, suggested that Jacinda wasn't as untouched by the battle as she pretended. Power had come at a cost, and while she would never admit it, Michael's refusal to break completely unsettled her. She had expected rage or surrender, not resilience. That unsettled dynamic added an intriguing layer. Jacinda needed Michael diminished to justify her actions, and his continued resistance threatened that justification. The long-term consequences began to crystallize. Michael didn't emerge victorious, but he didn't disappear either. Instead, he evolved. The naive belief that ethics alone could shield him was gone, replaced by a harder, more strategic outlook. He stopped reacting and started observing. He listened more than he spoke. He rebuilt quietly, choosing patience over pride. In doing so, he mirrored Jacinda's own methods, raising the unsettling possibility that her greatest legacy might be the transformation of her enemy. That thematic symmetry is classic General Hospital. Villains don't just hurt heroes, they reshape them. For viewers, the arc delivered something increasingly rare in daytime television: consequences that mattered. Jacinda's actions couldn't be undone with a single confession or courtroom twist. Michael's losses couldn't be erased by one bold speech. The damage lingered, coloring future interactions and redefining alliances. Every time Michael hesitated, Jacinda's shadow loomed. Every time Jacinda asserted control, the question lingered: how long before someone plays just as dirty against her? The show planted seeds for future reckonings without rushing them, trusting the audience to appreciate slow-burn storytelling. Ultimately, OMG! Jacinda Plays Dirty with Michael wasn't just a headline-worthy shock, it was a statement about power in Port Charles. Guns, mobs, and explosive secrets may dominate the town's history, but this storyline proved that manipulation, perception, and psychological warfare can be just as destructive. Jacinda didn't need violence to bring Michael to his lowest point, she only needed to understand him. And Michael, for all his intelligence, underestimated the cost of that understanding. As the dust settled, one truth became unavoidable: Port Charles had changed, Michael had changed, and Jacinda had proven that the dirtiest victories are the ones that leave no blood on the floor, only scars no one else can see. Even as the city's gossip mills churned with whispers of Jacinda's maneuvering, her brilliance lay in invisibility. She had not only destabilized Michael's empire but also reframed the narrative so that she appeared untouchable. In Port Charles, perception often outweighs reality, and Jacinda mastered this principle. Board members, business partners, and even friends began to second-guess themselves, unsure if their actions were genuine or subtly influenced by her calculated suggestions. That uncertainty gave her a near-permanent edge, and Michael, despite all his past experience navigating Corinthos family betrayals, struggled to regain footing. He realized that Jacinda wasn't just a problem to solve, she was a puzzle whose pieces shifted the moment he touched them. Meanwhile, Michael's personal life became a reflection of his professional instability. The Corinthos family, typically his bedrock, felt the tremors of Jacinda's subtle war. Trust, once implicit, now required verification, and the stress began to weigh on those closest to him. Loved ones noticed his hesitations, his unusual silence during meetings, his obsession with what others might be thinking. It wasn't just Jacinda's influence, it was the fear of failing, the pressure of making a wrong move that she could exploit. This made Michael a more isolated figure than he had ever been, and Port Charles quickly sensed that their usually unshakable good guy was suddenly vulnerable. In a town accustomed to overt threats, gunshots, blackmail, mob intimidation, Jacinda's methodical, almost clinical approach felt terrifyingly novel. For Jacinda, each step of her strategy was a lesson in patience. She understood the value of timing more than anything else. Her strikes were never impulsive, they were premeditated, with every word, gesture, and leak serving a larger purpose. Even moments that appeared to be mistakes were carefully engineered. She allowed Michael small victories here and there, making them seem like they were his own doing, only to have them unravel subtly and humiliate him without her direct intervention. That balance, between visibility and subtlety, between charm and menace, made her a master manipulator in the truest sense. And the most unnerving part? She didn't need to raise her voice or threaten anyone physically, she simply understood human nature and weaponized it with surgical precision. Michael's response was gradual but inevitable. At first, he tried to fight with his usual combination of logic and moral clarity, but Jacinda's tactics rendered those tools insufficient. Then came frustration, followed by introspection. He began to reevaluate the assumptions that had guided him for years: trust, loyalty, fairness, and found them inadequate against someone like Jacinda. Slowly, Michael began to adopt aspects of her approach, observing quietly, calculating subtly, and preparing a measured counter that didn't compromise his principles completely. The lessons he learned in this arc were hard-earned and painful, but they fortified him in ways he could not have imagined before Jacinda's calculated assault. Fans watching the arc were riveted not just by the action but by the psychological depth. Jacinda's manipulation was a mirror held up to Michael, forcing him, and the audience, to confront uncomfortable truths about vulnerability, pride, and the cost of underestimating someone in Port Charles. The storyline reinforced one of General Hospital's signature themes, that the battles that shape our lives are often fought not in public showdowns, but in private spaces where trust, perception, and patience are the ultimate weapons. Jacinda's arc was more than a villain story, it was a narrative about power dynamics, human psychology, and the slow burn of strategic brilliance. In conclusion, OMG. Jacinda plays dirty with Michael, stands as a masterclass in slow-burn tension and character-driven storytelling. Jacinda didn't just win battles, she reshaped Michael, altered Port Charles, and reminded viewers that the most effective manipulation is quiet, patient, and unseen. Her actions left lasting consequences, forcing Michael to evolve in ways both painful and necessary. By exploiting vulnerabilities, redefining alliances, and controlling the narrative without resorting to violence, Jacinda proved that the dirtiest games are often the ones played in the shadows, and in doing so, she cemented herself as one of General Hospital's most formidable and unforgettable antagonists.